Hi, good morning. Today is October 31st, 2025, and it is 8:38 a.m. U.S. Central Time. My name is Rinaldo J. Aguiar Marcano, and I'm recording this video from my home located at the 26714 Valley Side Drive, Katy, Texas, 77494. So today, first of all, happy Halloween to everyone. Um, So I think this is going to be indeed a spooky demo for the network, right? Um, so today I have a series of updates that are more on the technical side, and I'm going to be tailoring this more towards authorities, right? So more towards investigators, potential investigators, right? That eventually will, uh, look into this. I imagine, right? Given the gravity of the allegations. So it's more geared towards I would say FBI investigators, right, or maybe CIA. I don't know. I know the CIA, legally cannot operate within the U.S. Or because they will be targeting citizens, right? But I imagine, right, this might be useful to them because the same thing that they're doing here, they're doing it in other countries, right? So, and I say all this based on the data, right? Based on the data of Elon Musk's Geo Index, which I captured on September 11, 2024, and data analysis pipelines that I've developed over the last 5 years, right? Um, so, yes. So today I have a bunch of different things, right? Some of them are a little bit disconnected among each other, but are things that are important. I think I should say them because they could be time sensitive. So I'm going to be jumping a little bit from topic to topic. I just wanted to give you the heads up. But I think it's a very exciting set of observations. There's even some math topics in here, interesting topics, and with real world implications. So it's amazing. Anyhow, so I'm gonna get started, right? So the first point, I made a kind of a list and prioritized it a little bit to make this less bumpy than it needs to be. So the first observation, right? In my last demo, I talked about this magical device, right? That probably people should be looking for, which is Mueller's modem. His high tension modem, right? And I hypothesized, let me share my screen with you, right? Uh, so I said, right, like because of they're going through all this trouble to minimize the risk of interception of his uplink specifically. And I explained in the previous video why I say that. And because I know that one of the two dimensions that make an uplink weak are the number of hops, and the other dimension is the number of directions, right? So I came to the conclusion, because this is a wire, it's obviously a single direction. So the only thing to make it weak, the only way to make it weak would be increasing the number of hops, which means that they're not going to let that happen, right? Because if they went through all this trouble and created all this exposure to just put that line in there, they're not going to put the modem a mile away, because that will create multiple hops and multiple points. Every post is a hop, right? Every electricity post is an opportunity for the FBI to climb the post and connect something into the post, right? So they're not going to make that mistake. So, and I also hypothesized that this device, this magical device that he has somewhere, has to be of the size at least of a dishwasher, right? Because of the physical properties. I mean, this high tension, right? They need transformers, they need isolation, right? Electrical isolation, and all these things take a space. They need contact surface so that thing can dissipate heat, right? So it doesn't melt. So because of all these things, this has to be an equipment that is large in size, right? It's not good to be a small plastic-made modem made in China, right? Well, this is probably made in China, but it's not plastic, right? So, and because of all that, right? I noticed that the right outside in that corner of Lake Point Estates. Let me share my screen with you 1 second. Okay. So in that corner of Lake Point Estates, Robert Mueller's house is this one over here, right? So it's 24926 North Point Place. And he has this electrical line, right, high tension, that goes straight to his backyard, right? And you cannot see the post in here because they removed them, but you can see, they removed them from the satellite imagery, right? But you can see the shadow. And in fact, I'm going to show you the actual, because I have a photo that I took with the drone, and you can see that the image in Google Maps has been altered, right? If you compare them. Sorry. Okay. Okay. Yeah, this one. Right. So this is a photo that I took with the drone, right? And you can see the actual post, right? You can see it right here, right? You can see the line. This is a high tension line. In this one that I'm signaling here with the mouse is Eckhart property, right? But you can see this is it seems like it has even transformers on the pole, right? And you can see that the last post of that line is right at the border of Robert Mueller's house, right? And it doesn't go anywhere else. Like this line terminates here, which is in itself very strange, right? Why a utility company would send a power line, high tension, that doesn't go anywhere but Robert Mueller's house. So because of all that and the characteristics of the modem that I mentioned just a few minutes ago, sorry, where is it? Okay. Yeah. So I hypothesized that maybe that magical device could be located in here, which is it looks like a power substation of the utility company, right? Center point / end store. And I hypothesized it could be somewhere over here, right? In one of these utility easements, I think they're called. And I still think that it could be there, but if you count the number of posts that there are between this equipment and Robert Mueller's house, in fact, we can count them here, right? So you have these two, and then you have at least 4 more, right? So these are potential opportunities for interception, right? So even though all these posts are really, you can say that they're inside, right, of Lake Point Estates. Some of them are outside, right, in the fence. But what I mean is that they're under surveillance by people that live in Lake Point Estates and their houses, right, that are equipped with cameras and things like that. So you can make the argument that these are not feasible points of interception, right? So in reality, it's only one hope. But anyhow, the other thing that I thought is that maybe they have the modem in this concrete structure that is in the back of Robert Mueller's house, right? Which is right next to the pole, right? And this is one of those things that kind of checks the boxes, right? Like, because the other problem they have with the modem is that modem, because it's receiving all this high tension, is going to be radiating electromagnetic signals, and that could lead to detection, right? Because of the electromagnetic footprint of the equipment. And again, the fact that the size is somehow large, and it would be visible from the sky, right? So a solution could be to bury it, because if you bury it underground, then the electromagnetic radiation is not going to get out, especially if you put a concrete lid on top, right? It also mitigates the fire hazard. Like if there's a fire, the fire would be contained within this hole, and the house wouldn't burn. If there is a raid on the house, nobody's going to dig that concrete structure, right? So it also protects from raids. And it would explain why this concrete structure is not painted, right? Because they have the machine learning models that categorize things from satellite imagery based on color. And if they paint it, then it would signify that it could be mislead their own geospatial recognition system, right? So maybe that's why it's not painted. Because if you think about it, right, like, I mean, this is an individual that is high profile, right? Like, and you can see the pool is well maintained. You can see it in the photo, right? Like the yard is pristine. But this structure has been unpainted and like in raw cement form for years, which is, it looks odd, right? So it could be that the bottom is really underground, right? And it would be a very secure place to put it, because they will have to break into the backyard and then dig into the concrete to get to the modem, right? I don't know. Seems like a possible location as well, right? So I just wanted to put that out there to kind of complement what I said before, that I suspect it could be somewhere around here, right? Now, another thing that kind of supports that, right, that it could be underground, is that this other house, which is also an important agent, right, and I mentioned before that has posts, similar posts coming into their backyards, right? You can see the shadow, like they remove the post from the images, which implies that they have control over Google Maps satellite imagery via the company that took the photo, right? I imagine, which is Airbus, right? Like you can see in the copyright of the image. So either on Airbus or at Google, right? But they have the capability of removing things from the Google Maps imagery, right? To avoid that my pipeline detects them. But anyhow, you can see the shadows here, right? And again, in this case, there is no equipment on the easement, right? So where is the modem of this house, right? Of these two houses. These two houses are sharing this connection because it's right in the middle. So where is the modem, right? Well, one candidate, right, could be in this garage, because these ones don't have a concrete structure on the backyard. You cannot see it, right? There's nothing. So one candidate in this case could be this structure, right? That looks like a detached garage. Because this house, and I know this because I drive in front of that house several times per week. This house has other garages on this side, right? But this is the detached garage that they have. So I don't know. It could be somewhere around here, right? I don't know. And I think, if I recall correctly, the post does fall on this side of the fence, on the side of the fence where this garage is, right? So I don't know. This is kind of a mystery to me at this point, right? Where would be the modem of this house? Or it could be, the other explanation could be, because I mean, these people are lower profile, right, than Mueller. So the communication is not that sensitive. I mean, it's sensitive, right, obviously, because they put the line, but maybe not that sensitive as Mueller, right? So it's possible that they have a different type of modem for this one, right? Something that transmits short range to the house or something, and it's actually mounted on the pole. It could be, right? I cannot see it because the pole has been removed from the image, right? So I cannot see it exactly. Or it could be also that it's underneath this tree, right? And it's covered by the shades of the tree, and we cannot see the image here. So I don't know. It's kind of a mystery to me at this point, but I'll figure it out. Right. So this is more anecdotal, right? The next thing I'm going to say, but I'm going to say it because it implies collaboration on the location of that line from Phil Denning, right? So it is documented in emails that Phil Denning once, he complained to me about me having a garbage can that I had put, this is my house here, 2302, right? My house, sorry, at Lake Point Estates. So he complained once that I had put a garbage can more or less around here. And you see, it's in the back of my house, right? It wasn't visible on the street, from the street. But I had just put it there because I didn't want to bring in the garbage can inside of the home. So what he did, right, somehow he knew that he was there, although it wasn't visible from the street, and there's no house on the back of my house, right? But somehow he knew that that trash can was there. So what he did, he came through the safe, through the yard. So he didn't trespass the property lines, right? Because I have a no trespassing sign in there. But what he did, he came walking through the back through the front yard of the Chinese safe house of 2310 Britton Ridge Drive, and then from here, standing here, he took a picture of the garbage can. So he did all this just to take the picture, right? And then he complained, discrediting me, right, in the email, saying that I was, making the neighborhood ugly and that I should move out, and things like that. Anyhow, I'm saying this because a person, right, and I'm talking about Phil Denning, right, Philippe E. Denning. By the way, I've never been able to crack it, and I'm just going to say it here, but the pipeline thinks that the E in Philippe could be Everett, but I don't have a way to test if that's true, right? But I'm just going to say it there. So it could be that he controls the other house, the Daniel King Everett, right? This one. this house is registered to a Daniel King Everett, and the pipeline thinks that the E in Philippe E. Denning could be an obfuscation, the E of Everett. So it could be that this house is his or somebody related to him. But I have no way to either prove or disprove this hypothesis, right, derived from the pipeline. But anyhow, the reason I'm mentioning the garbage can, although it sounds like a mundane observation, is because, he, as the president of the HOA, if he has the ability, right, the attention to detail to notice this small trash can, which is, I don't know, maybe, 3 feet by 3 feet, right, wide, like the surface dimensions, how can he not notice this concrete structure on the backyard that is unpainted, right, ogling the neighborhood even from the sky, and not complain about it, right? And also, how can he not notice this secret gate, which I imagine was really used originally to bring the heavy equipment to plant those poles, those electricity posts and poles, and install all this infrastructure, right? How can Phil Denning notice that garbage can, but not notice these irregularities, right? Because all this violates the neighborhood bylaws, like the HOA bylaws, right? So I'm saying this not only because it's targeted application of the rules, but because it implies complicity directly of Phil Denning and the homeowners association with the clandestine communication network that these people have going to Mueller house with this high tension line, right? So that is direct physical evidence, unrefutable, that Phil Denning is in it, right? Alongside with Mueller. So that's why I'm saying that. Okay, so now that we're talking about this, in the last video, right, I made the observation that after I recorded that video, I think it was after the video on Friday, right? I hadn't yet recorded the video about the modem because I recorded that yesterday. But I recorded that on Sunday. But on Friday, after I recorded that video, as I was leaving Lake Point Estates, a person that resembled very much Mueller came riding on a bike. So I came out of my home, right? And I drove in this direction on Britton Ridge Drive towards the southeast. I turned on the corner, right? And as I'm arriving to the exit, which is this point, that man in a bike intercepted me right here, right? And he looked very much so like, I think, what Robert Mueller would look like. I've never met him in person, so I cannot be sure, right? It could be a body double. It could be somebody that happens to look very similar, but I think it was him, right? And I've never seen him in person, right? And I remember, I think I said this in the last video, that, so I recall that this is a TTP, right? Every time I talk about something that it's damaging to one of the agents of the network, they pass the agent in front of me. And I've recorded this in my, it's in my notes, I would say more than 120 times in the last 2 years. Okay, these are only the ones that I've noticed, right? Like if I say something important about the cat over here, what is his name? Michael Pretty, right? The Citgo employee, quote unquote, that Diosdado Cabello put next to my home in 2020 or 21. If I say something about him, he will come, when I leave my house, he will come out and will pass in front of me and will look at me, right? And I always thought, and I've noticed this with him and with many other agents, right? And as I said, more than 100 times. And I always thought that it was a form of gaslighting, right? A way to kind of make you think that you're crazy. But when this happened on Friday, that kind of debunks my hypothesis, right? Because why do this with Mueller, right? I mean, it would be, if it's a type of psychological manipulation, right? I mean, Robert Mueller is a man of global stature, right? Like he was the director of the FBI, right? I mean, it would be like trying to scare, like trying to scare a mosquito with a bazooka, right? Like bringing out a bazooka to scare, only to scare him, right? Like I don't know how to articulate it, but it feels like the liability that they bring by doing that to them, because then if that's him, that would confirm that that house is actually the house of the ex-FBI director, although they misspelled the middle name, right, in the registration of the house. So why do that, right? Just to try to psychologically manipulate me, right? Although they know that if they've done this 120 or more times and they haven't caused any effect, that hasn't deterred me, right? In 3 years, is this going to deter me now? So that didn't make sense. So an idea occurred to me, right? I started thinking about what could be the goal of doing this, right? And like I try to work the backwards problem, the problem backwards, right? Like, knowing what they're doing, what problem could be solved by doing this. And it reminded me, that exercise reminded me of a distributed computing technique that I've seen and I've used many times, right? Which is called a taint counter. Okay, and I'm gonna get a little bit technical because, as I said at the beginning, this session is intended for more. I mean, anybody can watch it. I welcome people to watch it, but I'm tailoring the content to people that are investigators, right? Technical investigators. So a taint counter. Okay, so in distributed systems, right? Distributed systems are hierarchical. Like if you were to represent them with like with a shape, right? Like with a geometric shape, it would be like a triangle, right? There's I'm gonna talk about the computer science part of this, but everything I'm saying also applies to this network, right? Because this network at the end is a distributed computing system powered by humans, right? Instead of worker servers, they have worker humans, right? But in the computer science world, in the distributed computing science world, you would represent it with a triangle because it's a hierarchical structure. The idea is the workers, and they're like levels or layers, right? So the workers at the bottom are the ones that are doing the work on the ground, right? Like, for example, in the case of Google, those are the machines that are reading the documents from the hard drives, right? Then they do some magic, right? Whatever it is that they do, and they pass their results to the next level. And the next level, one property that it has is that it has less servers than the previous layer. So on each layer that you go up, you have less and less and less, which is a metric of prominence on itself, right? Like the higher you are in the hierarchy, the more prominent you are. Like, for example, Diosdado Cabello would be in level 1 or level 2 of this hierarchy, right? Where there's only a handful of individuals at that level, right? And then as you go down, right, Michael Pretty would be at the bottom of that hierarchy, right? Because he is doing the work on the ground next to my home, listening to what I say right now, right? And he will come passing in front of my house when I leave the house in a couple of hours. So, yes, the taint counter, right? So the problem with distributed systems is that you don't have a single machine, but you could have thousands of machines, right? Arranged in this specific way, hierarchical way. And the problem is that you don't have a way to see quickly if a machine is misbehaving, like if the hard drive went wrong, right, were bad, or if the RAM got corrupted, or the machine got fried, right? So one way to do this on a system at this scale that I'm describing, right, is with a taint counter. The idea is every time, so the servers that are on the lower levels of a given server are called the children, and the ones that are above are the parents, right? This is distributed computing 101, right? So one way is a taint counter. The idea is every time a children tries to communicate something to a parent and the communication fails, the children keeps a counter, right? That this parent is misbehaving, right? And the same, when a parent is trying to receive or send something to a children, from a children or to a children, and the communication fails or doesn't check out certain expectations, the taint counter in the parent increases, right? And then, because you are looking at this node from the two directions, imagine that it's a node that is in the middle somewhere, right? Because you are looking at this thing from the two directions, you keep these counters, and then what you can do, you can rank all the machines by these numbers, by these counters, right? So how many nodes had failed parent communication, or how many nodes had failed children communication, right? And if you rank them, the ones that rank higher are the ones that are more faulty. And what you have to do is remove them from rotation and put a new one in, right? With the same software, but take the machine out and put a new machine in. When I say new, I don't mean like bought from the store. I mean, instantiate a new instance and put it in the rotation, right? In the cluster. So I think that what they're doing by passing the agents next to the person that talks about the agent is increasing a taint counter. This would allow, because this person has the evil app that I call the hell app, right? What Travis Kalanick called hell at Uber, right? That's the app that has evolved into this over the last decade. Right? And so because they have the app and the app has GPS location and they have a bug on me that tells them my location, like for example in the Tesla car, when Robert Mueller passed in front of me, that increased the taint counter of Robert Mueller, respective to Rinaldo, the target, right? So what I think they're doing is that they're keeping track of how many times every agent has been exposed by a given target. I don't think this was targeted to me. I think this is something that they implemented years ago, right? And they've been using it. And that way they can rank the level of exposure or legal risk that each agent has, right? And combine that with the level in the hierarchy. Why? Well, because it's not the same that Michael Pretty gets a mention in these videos than Mueller gets a mention in this video. It's more serious, right, for the entire organization. So that increases the counter of Mueller in this case, but because he's more prominent, that carries more weight in the algorithmic formula that they're using to compute legal risk, right? So what they're trying to solve is having a metric to understand their own legal risk in their own distributed system, right? As Google has metrics to understand the infrastructure risk in their own distributed systems, right? So it's a concept borrowed from distributed computing. Now, but this also has other implications, right? So when I was using this technique, right, at Google, for example, besides, you can do things more sophisticated, right? Like I'm just simplifying it. But for example, besides counting, right, and ranking the machines by importance, because you have to replace first the machines that are higher in the hierarchy, right? So this is an algorithmic determination based not only on the count, but also on the importance. But also, you can imagine that you make the counter a little bit more complex, and instead of one counter, you keep multiple counters. In the case of computing, you could have a counter for disk problem, a counter for memory problem, a counter for another kind of problem, right? And then you can rank the problems. Why? Well, because if you're seeing that you're getting 70% of the errors from disk, your disk supplier, you need to change it, right? Or if you're getting, I don't know, 80% of your errors are coming from memory, you have a problem of corruption of memory. It's mostly sure that that's the case. So understanding the root cause of the taint is important. And in their case, I imagine they do the same by ranking who caused the taint. In this case, when I mention Pretty, my counter will increase, right? And will increase weighted by the importance of Michael Pretty. And when I talked about Mueller, my counter increases weighted by the importance of Mueller, which is very high. And then they sum all the contributions of all my counters. And then the next logical thing for them to do is to rank their threats, right? To kind of create a leaderboard of who are the people that are more dangerous to our network, right? I'm talking what they would do, right? And then I imagine, right, they have some threshold above which they have to take action, right? Like, for example, taking the child. I think that taking the child was because when I reported Diosdado Cabello to the IRS, because he's so high up, that increased my taint counter to a level that went above the threshold, right? And that triggered their decision of let's take the child, right? I guess what I'm trying to say is that this taint counter is really a weapon, right? Because if you, as a non-member of the network, if you expose people that are important, then your counter will go up and they will take action against you to, either harm you by taking your child, for example, or maybe eliminate you, right? So it's a weapon, right? So, and this is like, I don't know, right? And this is kind of one of those things where the legal frameworks in society, right, have not caught up with technology, right? Let me give you an example. Like, this is a thought. It's a bit of a profound thought, and I don't know the answer to this, legally speaking, right? But imagine, right? Imagine for a second. Just this is the premise of the question I'm going to ask. Okay. Imagine for a second that Robert Mueller knew about the existence of this 10 counter before he came driving on the bike to intercept me. So if he knew, I guess my line of reasoning would be, if he knew, right, that this system exists, and that by intercepting me in his bike, he would be increasing my counter in this system that could put my life in danger, right? Because he could drive, he knows how important he is, right? And he knows that the importance of the person mentioned by the source is a factor, right? Then by driving intentionally his bike and intercepting me, he is directly putting my life in danger, right? I mean, this is a deliberate action that puts my life in danger. The question is, if something happens to me, would he be responsible, right, for driving that bike that ultimately led to my physical disappearance, for example, right? I don't know, right? I don't know. I think from a legal point of view, and I'm saying this because I've been exposed to the legal system for 6 months, right? I think this would be a very hard thing to prove in court, right? But and if that's the case, what it really means is that the technology is too far ahead than the law compared to what the law can do, right? Because this is obviously a weapon that could be lethal, right? And needs to be regulated by law. Like there has to be a law that punishes this, right? But probably doesn't exist yet, right? So, but I think this is good because this means that we are in this thing that we're doing, we are pushing the boundaries, right? We're testing what is not really possible today in society, right? In terms of countering this. So I don't know, just an interesting thought. But yeah, so the 10 counter is what they're doing, right? That's why they pass the agent in front of the person that exposes them. It's not only to gas, it's not a psychological, I mean, yes, it does have that effect, right? But that the person can second guess, like, well, maybe this is, maybe I'm just imagining this, right? But I think the real intention is to programmatically keep track at this data point to the counters, right? So they can then take algorithmic decisions, on what to do, right, with that threat to the network. Okay, so that's an interesting topic. Okay, now that we're on this topic, right, talking about Mueller, his magical modem, the power line. In the last video, I talked about the generalization of this and the discovery of what I called. So I created two metrics, right? So religious cellular towers. So these are cellular towers that are located in the grounds of churches with high acreage. Okay, and also I created another metric, OPEC plus religious cellular towers, which are the same, but the facility is also combined with the power substation to do the demodulation of the signals and all that, right? So of course, these two metrics are signals of prominence in the network, right? Because if you have to have the power substation, is because you are sending orders, right? So these are places where orders are dispatched, important, sensitive orders. So, as always, right? Once you have a new metric, you turn it into a new signal, right? So what I did, I combined these metrics with the paramilitary scores that are recorded in the Elon Musk's GeoIndex. The idea is you divide. I'm gonna tell you my implementation, right? I have to run more experiments to tune this signal better, right? But I started by the simple thing, and it works beautifully. So the simple thing that I started with is you take the paramilitary score from the Elon Musk GeoIndex, which is public, right? It's in BigQuery and it's available to anybody, and you can search it on spyhealth.org. You can see the scores in there, right? So let me give you an example, right? So if we look for Robert's, this is a good example, right? So let's look at Robert Mueller's house, right? So you can see that it's marked in the index, right? It's not, I'm not making this up. So if you take this address, right, you can go to spyhealth.org, which is a website that I maintain, where all this data from Elon Musk GeoIndex is public, right? And you can click on this tab, paramilitary and crypto, right? And then you enter the address. And once you do that, see, so you see his house, right? There's multiple points in his house, 42 meters, and I know this inside the house because these backyards are huge. I mean, the size of this is almost 100 feet, right, wide, and the size of this is like 200 feet, right? And you can see that in the scale here, right? So, you know, this point is located only 42 meters from the centroid of the house, right? So from this point, more or less, right? So it falls in the backyard. And all these points are communication points, right? And you see he has multiple points inside of his backyard. All these points would qualify as being inside of his address. So if you add them up, right? I would say until 75 meters, right? If you add them up, he has more or less 19, 23, 30, 34, right? 34,000 points. And you know, if you do the same with Phil Denning, right? Right? Phil Denning is the other accomplice that helped create that communication line by ignoring the HOA rules. See, so Phil Denning has within 28 meters, just only 28 meters of the center of his house, he has 8,000 points. And again, right, like he has multiple clusters, right? There's one of 20,000 points just 32 meters away of the centroid. So all these fall inside of his property lines, right? And one of these is where he had the antenna in the border of his fence, right? Which was, I think, was somewhere located around here, right? If I recall correctly, around here, more or less. Yes. So that is interesting, right? Yes. So okay. So back to the signal, right? So what I did, I turned the signals about the religious cellular towers, both opaque and non-opaque, into scoring signals that I combine with these paramilitary scores that come from the Elon Musk GeoIndex, right? And the results are amazing, right? So the idea is, so I'm going to give you the formula, right? This is a simplistic formula that I started with yesterday, but I'm going to refine it. So you take the paramilitary scores contained within the property boundaries, the property lines, you sum them all up, and you divide that result by the distance to the closest religious cellular tower or OPEC plus cellular tower. If it's an OPEC plus cellular tower, I divide the distance by 2, right? So because remember, I'm putting this on the division, right, on the denominator, right, of that equation, of that algorithmic equation. So the longer the distance, the idea is the longer the distance, the paramilitary score gets dampened more. But if you're very close, if you're less, for example, if you're less than a mile away, because you would be dividing by a number lower than 1, sorry, a number between 0 and 1, right? So say that you are 0.5 miles. So this distance is expressed in miles. So if you're 0.5 miles away, you will be basically doubling your paramilitary score, right? The paramilitary score of this candidate property, right? In short, the ones that are closer to the antenna get boosted. And the ones that are further away than a mile get demoted a little bit. And this brings up brings visibility to these key people, right, that I'm going to describe. And again, if it's an OPEC plus tower, then I divide the distance by 2, making this effect even stronger, right? So if it's an OPEC plus tower, in this example, OPEC plus religious cellular tower, and you are 0.5 miles away, your paramilitary score, instead of doubling, quadruples, right? Because the distance is divided by 2. So instead of 0.5, you're dividing by 0.25. And this works beautifully, right? Using this technique, this is in information retrieval systems, this is called a re-ranking technique. The idea is, after you have your candidates fully ranked, you can tweak the ranking a little bit with things like this, like I'm described, right? So it found a very important thing, right? So I'm just going to give you an example. So this one, right? So this one is very interesting. It found these 3 houses, right? I'm going to give you the addresses in a second. And there's several anomalies in this set of 3 houses, right? So first of all, it's a dead-end street protected by a huge buffer zone, and as you can see here, right, where I'm moving the mouse, you see these empty lots over here. They are just making sure that nobody can intercept anything from this house anywhere, right? And it's only 500 feet away from the OPEC religious. No, sorry, this is not an OPEC religious. It's only religious cellular tower. It doesn't seem to have the substation attached to it. But it's on the South Stone Church, okay? On the grounds of the church. And these houses are less than 500 feet away, right? So they get boosted. Their paramilitary scores got boosted because of that. And they also have the water tank marker less than 500 feet away. And you can see the water tank marker over here. Now, one thing that is interesting is that the addresses of these 3 contiguous houses ends in 0, which is strange, right? And you have described this before. I've seen this before, where like 2 houses on the same street end in 2 contiguous houses, which is strange, particularly in this area of Katy. And when that happens, it means that there's intelligent design in assigning those numbers just to make this system work, right? And the fact that these 3 addresses on such a short distance, all of them end in 0, which is tied to the financial messaging channel, is very telling, right? So this is really a financial supernode, like these 3 houses over here. The 3 houses addresses are 25130 Pecan Lane, Katy, Texas 77494. I think this is the master of the cluster, right? His name is Philippe Powell. Then you have 25, and note how all the addresses end in 0, right? 25120 Pecan Lane, Katy, Texas 77494. And this is Mukherjee Dipankar, I think it would be pronounced that way, right? And Elizabeth. And then you next to that, you have the 25110 Pecan Lane, Katy, Texas 77494. And this is Batson, Roderick, and Christina. So that is super interesting. Yes. So this guy, right, Philip Powell, has a company, right? And this also super. I mean, it's interesting, right? That programmatically, that I was able to find this based on the location of the cell phone tower, right? And I found this programmatically, and I drove there intentionally to look at this, right? And when I get there, right, the guy has a sign outside. It's a huge sign, right? Outside of the house. It's a company, right? And it's called TL Global. But what caught my attention was he had a slogan underneath the title, right? The name, right? And I'm not kidding. The slogan reads the following. It says, "Applied knowledge is power." Right? Think about it for a second, right? What he's saying, right? He's saying applied knowledge is power, right? Although that the phrase is short, if you expand it a little bit, what it really means, right? What he's saying is intelligence gathering, when you apply that intelligence, it allows you to project power onto others. Because power is a dynamic that doesn't exist in isolation. Like you cannot have power if you're in a vacuum, right? You have to have power over other people, right? So the power is something that you project onto other people. It's not something that you own in a vacuum, right? So what he's really saying is that if you apply intelligence gather, you can project power onto others, which is exactly what this network does, right? By kidnapping people, using the courts and all that. So, I mean, he literally hung a sign outside of his house that says, I'm part of this network, right? That there's no other way to interpret this, right? And this is backed by the data that I'm showing, right? Like the houses ending in 0, the geo index, points, the location relative to the antenna, the buffer zones. And another thing that is strange, I haven't figured this out, but I'm gonna think about what this could mean. But this TL global, right? Oh, and see, like the phone number has the 3 zeros, right? This is the trigram 0 in the phone number is like this. This guy is a. If this was a sport, I don't know, if this was soccer, right? This guy would be playing in the World Cup, right? To that level. Yes, and he works in financing, right? I hadn't seen this, like the pipeline did not pick up on this, but that company, wow. Yeah, so he finances homes, imagine that, right? So exactly, it's a financial supernode, right? So he is probably involved in the financing of the houses, right? The setting up of this residential, quote unquote, right, infrastructure. Yeah, it's a trusted global financial partner. Wow, it's amazing. It's amazing that the pipeline, by looking at the addresses, picked up that it was a financial node without seeing this, right? Wow. The precision is amazing, I have to tell you. So this is another thing, right? Well, I'll mention that in another video. Okay, the other thing I haven't figured out is that when you drive through this street, right? This is marked, they have a sign here that says private property, do not pass, right? Which I don't think is true. I mean, this looks like a public road, right? What I think they're doing is that they don't want anybody to drive over here for some reason, right? And they seem to have some things in here. Huh. But okay, so in this area, right here in this corner, underneath these trees, you cannot see it because it's underneath the trees. They have a set of mailboxes that are kind of hidden. Like you cannot see them unless you drive past the curve. But they're being used because there were keys inside on some of the locks, right? But they're like obviously hidden on purpose, right? And I don't know, right? Because if you look at the street view photos of TL Global, for example, you can see, well, the house next to it, that they have mailboxes, right? Like you can see the mailbox over here. So who these mailboxes belong to is not clear to me, right? It could be these houses that they don't want anybody to drive through this street, right? Because they have a sign that says private property, do not pass, right? Like it gives you the impression that if you pass, somebody's going to shoot you, right? It looks scary, like, and the area is it's not maintained, like it's it looks like an abandoned lot, and it says private property, but this is obviously a public road, right? So anyhow, when I saw the sign and I know they're looking for an opening, I of course didn't drive through the because I'm not going to give them an excuse to shoot me, right? But I don't know. I think somebody with authority should drive here to see what is that they have in here, right? That they're secreting so much. But anyhow, that is Philippe Powell, right? And TL Global, and remember, they are the company that applies knowledge, because applied knowledge is power. Okay, so that's important to remember. Okay, so now I'm gonna go back to Lake Point Estates and transition to what I think is probably one of the biggest blunders in history of intelligence, right? And it was committed by Phil Denning. So this is what happened, right? As when I moved to Lake Point Estates, maybe I don't know, I think it was June 26, 2024, right? A year and a few months ago. You know, I didn't know how important Lake Point State was, right? And I imagine they let me buy the house because they calculated that because they had this thing over complete control, it's a gated community, unincorporated subdivision with its own law, bylaws, I mean. Having me there would be better for them, right? Because they could do anything inside of those gates and nobody will be watching, right? So I think they let me move in there, right? But the blunder is that when I moved, Phil Denning sent me via the security guard kind of a package, right? Like a welcome package. It wasn't anywhere. I mean, his job from day one was to target me, right? But he made it look like he was welcoming me, right, to the neighborhood. But it wasn't a gift or anything, right? It was just forms that I had to fill with information, right? For the cars, the plates, right? So the security gate would open when the car comes in, things like that. And he included a small booklet that I don't have it with me, but I'll post a picture of it. And of course, at this point that I'm describing, I had not captured the geo-index, right? I captured the geo-index 3 months later after I moved in. So I moved in June, and I captured the geo-index on September 11th, 2024. So they were so confident, right, that I will never figure this out, that he gave me a booklet with all the names of all the owners. It's a booklet that they print. It's like a neighborhood directory, because remember, this is a small community of 90 houses or so, right? And he gave me this booklet that has all the names, a map of the neighborhood with the numbers and the names of everybody, right? And even with the names of the pets. Like in the booklet, the names of the pets and the names of the owner and the wife, and you know, they're all there, right? Of course, he did this because he had no way to know that I was going to capture the geo-index 3 months later, and not only that I would decode it and map it back to the actual names. So when I captured the geo-index, they changed the names of the important agents in the registration of the houses, right? But I found the booklet, right? And the booklet, if you compare the names, you can see which ones were changed, right? So it's obvious the ones that they intentionally changed the names, right? I'm talking about the registration of the houses with the tax collector office, right? Because they know that my pipeline ingests that data to find the names, right? So the process that my pipeline does in terms of mapping this back is from the coordinates in the geo-index, it does reverse geocoding to find the actual address. And then once the address is known, it checks on the government databases to get the actual names of the registrants, right? So when I capture the geo-index, they change the names of the important houses, right? But the booklet is printed. I have a printed copy, right? They can't change that. So I have the names of the real names, right, of all the accomplices of Robert Mueller, right? So I posted that in the channel, right? Let me show you. And I'm going to put it in the book as well. So this is what the map looks like. And it's a booklet, right? Like it has a description it has multiple pages, and in every page is a house. And it has the name of the person, the household, and the pets, right? And a photo of the house, in case there isn't a doubt. But I'm saying this is one of the biggest intelligence blunders in the world, in the history, because he gave that to me, right? When I moved in, it's just crazy to think about, right? But that gives you an idea of the level of confidence they had, right, back in the days. So if you open this, right, the most important of them all is this one. Mueller, right? 24903, North Point Place. This is the most important agent. Like, this is a global level leader. Like, this is a global, he is more important than Mueller, right? In fact, Mueller's house acts as a buffer to protect that house. So this is the number one, right? I would put Mueller at number two in the scheme of things, right? And don't get me wrong, like, all of the houses, right? All of the houses are agents. And, I know that, when I say that, people might think, well, it's not possible. Well, yeah, but think about it, right? This is a multi-decade operation, right, that they have deployed at Lake Point Estates. Like, this is a Dockerhood planned 25 years ago that has almost 100 houses. And the cheapest house is mine, which costed $1 million, right? And that's the cheapest. The most expensive house is this one, and it costs something like $3.5 million, right? So if you add the property values of all the houses, this cluster, right, the market value is around $350 million, right? I don't know, or say $200 million, right? Some houses will be on 1.5, some houses will be 2, some houses will be 3, right? Let's round it out, round it to, I don't know, 250 million, right? And they went through the trouble of tending this high power tension line that it's paired with a secret magical modem that Robert Mueller has, right? They're not going to leave, and it's a gated community, unincorporated, right? The accountant lives on the back side of the neighborhood. They put the church, they put the church next to it to protect it. And not only that church, they have 5 churches on all. They have churches on all the sides, basically, right? Except on behind where the accountant is, because that's a street. But on all the other 3 sides, they have churches, right? Multiple. They have 5 churches in total surrounding this thing, right? So, I mean, this area, right? This small area is an investment of. Let me show you. Right. So these are the churches, right? So this is the important one that is protecting the power line, right? So this one, Life Church, is the one where Phil Denning and the HOA conducts the meetings of all these agents, right? It's like the social club. They have a Chinese church here. This one, right? It's 3. They have this St. George Capital Orthodox Church is 4, and they have this mesquite 5, right? So just in this small area, they have 5 churches, right? And this is actually a metric that I derived maybe 6 months ago, right? I called it number of religious acres per 1,000 inhabitants, right? Like counting how many acres are dedicated to supposedly worship per the number, divided by the number of inhabitants, right? The higher that metric is more likely that it's being used, that the churches are being misused for surveillance, right? Or counter surveillance. So what I'm saying, right? If you add the price, like imagine that you want to compute you want to set up this again, right? And you want to do it exactly like they did it. What would be the price tag of that today, right? Building these 5 churches, buying all that land, and building all those 100 houses with those high-end luxury characteristics, right? The acre minimum, the minimum size of those lots is 1 acre, right? The minimum. The smallest one is the lot I have is 1 acre. If you add all that up, it's probably $600 million, right? $500 million, I don't know, something around that line. We're talking about $500 million, right, to deploy that. Do you think they're going to let a stranger and anybody come and buy a house in that place? Of course not, right? Like this is la creme de la creme, right? So all of them are in it, right? But I, as an exercise, I marked the most important ones in this chart, okay, in the map. So the top, the number 1 person is this Mueller, and they changed they changed that registration. Like you can see it here, right? 24903. I'm gonna do the lookup here so you can see 24903 North Point Oh, they've reverted. Nice. Well, now we have the name. Because before, like, I don't know, maybe like 3 months ago, right? When the pipeline did the fetch, it had a name that was, it looked like somebody from the Middle East, right? But now it's back to Mueller Terrell. Okay, so the name is Terrell. Oh, come on. You have to be kidding me. So he's an intellectual property lawyer, right? So the kind of people that would sue me for, from Goldman Sachs or from X, from Twitter, right? When they were trying to sue me for intellectual property. I understand. That's interesting. Okay. So, well, nice to meet you, Richard. But let me show you one that was changed, for example, right? So this one, Trevino, right? So Trevino is that person got flagged by the pipeline, and he was co-clustered with Clovis Trevino, right? With his childhood friend from Venezuela, that is also an attorney, of course, right? And she works in international arbitration, and she lives in Miami, close to Emil Michael. And international arbitration is an important topic for Diosdado Cabello, and she's Venezuelan, of course, right? So Trevino, so this house, if you look it up in the map, I think I already did this exercise. Let me show you. Oh, I didn't put the address on. Yeah, so it's this one, right? 24826 North Point Place. I'm finding it here because in this photo I took, you cannot really read the address, right, because of the glare. But the address of Trevino is 24826 North Point Place, right? And if you look it up, and this booklet was given to me by Phil Denning indirectly, right, through the security guard, maybe a year and a half ago, right? But now the registration shows a name that it's an Americanized name, right? It's not. And again, as I said, like this operation of Lake Point Estates is something that has been planned and deployed for decades, right? They're not going to change the setup and let a new person come in, and as in everything, right, in these hierarchical systems, societal systems, the higher you are is the more difficult to make a change. Like, for example, to change Trevino or Mueller, right, from that location to another location, it would be a super hard change to implement. So that's not something that they would do lightly, right? I guess what I'm trying to say, if they haven't moved Mueller, they're not going to move Trevino, right, for logic reasons. So this tells me that this is not the real name, right? But the problem is that they change, and they change a bunch of the names, right? A lot of the names they change. But I have a printed copy of the booklet that you can see here, right, with all the names. And I have the actual booklet even with the pets' names. So it's not a situation that is easy to escape from, right? Nice. Okay, so that's yes. So now I'm going to talk about a bit of a more technical topic, okay? And before I do that, I promised in the last session that I would show a picture of the OPEC Plus religious cellular tower located at the River Point Church in Sugarland. I think it's called River Point. Let me double check. Yes. One thing I want to say, right? This point is a marker. It's a prominence name marker that has to do with a forward position. Okay. Good examples of these are Lake Point Estates, River Point Church, and there is another couple of point neighborhoods that are located here, precisely behind the house of the TL Global guy, the Philip Powell, right? Behind that, there is a neighborhood called something point as well. And it's obviously a forward position because it's right behind antenna. Like all those houses got boosted by the signal re-ranking implementation that I described before. Here's Post-Oak Property Management, which is the company that manages the HOA of Lake Point State, which of course has to be in it. Like they sued me and sued my company, like the publisher of my books, to silence the books, right? To try to drive me into bankruptcy or I don't know what, right? And this is the company that basically Philip E. Denning uses as a shield, right? To harass me, right? In this case. Yes, so this point neighborhood is this one. Oh, no, this is Pinot Enclave. The point maybe is one of these. I saw it yesterday. I'll find the name. But there is well, that we're talking about post-oak management, right? You can see the buffer zones, and if I look them up, right? They're marking the index, like I already checked. So anyhow, yeah, so we were talking about I can't recall. I lost track of why we were talking about the point. Oh, right, because of the River Point, right? So River Point Church. So in the last demo, I promised that I would show the picture of the antenna, right? And this River Point Church has the point name marker that is usually associated with a forward position, right? And they have the OPEC plus cellular tower in the grounds of the church on the back, right? Which shows that they're protecting the uplink, which means that they're giving orders, probably forward orders, from this location, right? Where is it? Oh, no, this is Missouri, Texas. Yes. Okay. This was the one I visited on Monday. So here you can see this is the power substation, right? So the OPEC plus part of the setup. The antenna is located here, but you cannot really see it because they removed it from Google Maps again and again. This is an Airbus Maxar Technologies image, right? But I took a picture of the antenna, so I'm going to show you the picture. The picture is this one, right? You can see that it's a cellular tower next to the power substation and located on the grounds of the church, right? So that's one thing that I wanted to show you. And here are other examples, right? Here you can see the power tower, so the OPEC plus part of the signal, combined with the array of cellular antennas on the top. And you can see the size of this thing, right? Like the amount of power that must be handling, right? You can put that in perspective with the size of a card and the size of the sign, right? And with this sign, you can see exactly which tower. That's why I took the picture, showing the sign, so you can pinpoint exactly which tower this is. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about something more technical. Okay. So this I've known for a few days, and I haven't said anything because I didn't want to give them the heads up, so I could keep gathering data, and I got a lot of good data from this. But they figured it out yesterday, on Monday, when I went to Tesla. They did an experiment and they caught me, right? And I saw when it happened. So they wanted to test if I knew, right? And they set up the situation. So they put a car in front of me having this characteristic, and they had another person watching me visually, my reaction, right? And when I took out my phone, the car went away and the other person went away, right? So they tested the hypothesis that I knew. So they already know that I know, so I'm going to say it. So this is what happened. In the book, I talk about, and I published this maybe 2 months ago, right? About the bigram key, right? How they use bigrams, and this is an information retrieval technique used at many companies, Google, Yahoo, Microsoft, for ranking or scoring things, right? Like text, queries, and documents. And so I'm not going to give the entire thing here. Please check it out in the book. The book is free to download. You can download it for free. So there's no cost in getting this knowledge. So check out the bigram key, right? It's on the volume 2 of the book, I think. So after I published that, they have been doing a major rehaul of their license plate scoring system. And remember when I told you the other day, even if you dismantle what they have, they will do it again, but in a more sophisticated way that's harder to detect. Remember? This is exactly what is happening, right? Real time here. Sorry. So what they're doing is they did, I believe it's a major overhaul, and it took them almost 2 months to do it, which kind of coincides with a typical software development cycle, right? So they've been testing this and developing and testing it, right? It's an arms race, what you're saying, right? That's really what it is. A technological arms race happening real time. So what they did is that they're testing an experiment in which they're replacing the bigram scoring with something more sophisticated and evolved, hoping that the pipeline will not pick it up. But the pipeline did pick it up. And what they're doing is something based on set theory. Okay, I'm not a mathematician. I'm not. I have a vague understanding of set theory. So I'm gonna tell you what I remember, right? And I might be wrong. Like, don't judge me on that. That's not my field, right? I'm just a small guy trying to survive. But so set theory is a mathematical logical theory. I think it's hundreds of years old, and it basically it's a branch of logic and mathematics, or that articulates the existence of sets of things, right? So you can say, the set of all the Diosdado Cabello agents. So all the 7 agents is a set, right? Or the set of all the, so I don't want to get deep into the theory, but it's basically a part of logic and mathematics that explains and governs. It's a theory, really, right? Like, it hasn't been disproven, but it's a theory. It's a mathematical theory, and it regulates, it governs the sets, right? Basically, the sets of things, the groups of things. So what they did is that what they're experimenting with is that they're changing their bigram scoring, which was basically stolen from Google. And I'm telling you that as a former Google ranking engineer. Like, I know how the scoring works because I worked on that with my own hands, right? And I see what they had with the plates. It was the same, right? So they stole it. But anyhow, so they're experimenting with replacing that with a system that basically is a framework based on set theory. And the idea is that they can, so in set theory, there's like 11, I don't have the mathematical jargon in English, so I don't know how to call that. In Spanish, we'll call it corolarios, I don't know, let's call them statements, right? So set theory is composed by a set of 11 or 12, I can't recall, statements, right? Like, are things that are assumed about sets, or rules that govern this set theory, right? A set can contain nothing, right? A set can contain other sets, things like that, right? So these are like statements, or like rules. So what they have now is a framework that they can write rules of belonging to a set and if it passes the rules of the set theory based on this, let's call it pseudo language, then the object is believed by the system to belong to the set. Right. The system believes that the things belong to the set. So this is more sophisticated because it doesn't rely on it doesn't rely on the bigrams, right? It doesn't rely on two characters appearing next to each other or with a character in between or reverse. Like it doesn't. I guess what I'm trying to say, set theory is a more generalized and abstract concept, and bigrams scoring is just one possible implementation of a set. I don't know if that makes sense. So what they did, they took the level of abstraction one level higher, to a place where they could still use the bigrams because they can just encode the existing bigrams as sets, right? But they could write more complex sets beyond the bigrams that would be harder to detect, right? That's the idea. It's a beautiful, I don't know how to say this, but I see this, right? I see this move of them, and I feel lucky, right, to be able to witness this and to be able to understand it. I feel lucky that, I don't know, my parents gave me whatever it is that they gave me that makes me be able to understand this thing, right? It's humbling, really, to see. But anyhow, so in this new framework that they have, they can write more abstract sets that are not bigram matches, right? They can also write the bigram matches, and that was necessary because otherwise the current system, they would have to run two systems in parallel, right? Which is even more risky. Or they would have to deprecate the old system, right? Which is also impossible because then it would bring down the network, right, of cars, right? Which is a major part of the network. So it's a way more abstract, more complex, that lets them run the two things just by doing configuration changes, right? And it's more adaptable because they can write new sets in a matter of minutes, right? I'm talking about the things in the license plates that would pass the set conditions, right? And now this is deep, very deep, because this implies a very deep collaboration with the DPS, right? Because how did they get all these plates this quickly, right? And the tax collector office in Katy, right, in Fort Bend County, because that's the entity that gives out the plates. But anyhow, I digress. So I'm not going to, of course, give you all the sets here. I will give those to the authorities, all the sets that have been picked up. But I'm going to give you one because it's nuclear, right? This is a nuclear set. And I'm going to describe the set so you can see how sophisticated this is, right? I don't have my notes with me, so I might get a couple of things wrong. But if I may describe the set more or less, right? The set would be described as the following. The set of license plates in Texas that contain more than one character that looks like a W if or not rotated. Imagine the complexity of that, right? So to give an example, characters that would, plates that would qualify for this would be plates that contain the letter M as in Mike and another M is one example, right? And they could be together or separated. So for example, M, another character M, or MM, right? Or another character MM, right? To give context, in Texas, license plates of people, the non-commercial license plates and non-government have 3 letters and 4 numbers. So 7 characters in total. So, for example, plates that are MM would qualify, right? But MW would also qualify because the W, if you rotate it, converts to an M, right? Or the M, if you rotate it, sorry, it's because it converts to a W. The real character, the anchor, is a W, not the M. So the M, if you rotate it, converts to a W, and then it would be WW, right? So MW converts to WW and it qualifies. Now, of these plates, there's another set. So this is a different set, which starts exactly the same. The definition of a set in the configuration file is probably exactly the same, but adds another condition. The next condition is that the plate starts with a W or a character that converts to a W. So this is a more restrictive set. If the plate starts with M or W, then this is a more important, an agent that belongs to a more important set. Okay. And there's another set that is the same idea, but where the characters convert to W and N as in Nicole. So W and M as in Mike, and W and N as in Nicole. So MN would belong and WN would belong. And again, if W is at the beginning, it's more important. But you see, right? So they basically created a new framework that adds complexity, abstraction, and is more flexible, right? So beyond the implementation of this, I think it shows their mentality, right? They're not going to give up. They are going to do this again, right? So that's why the world needs to work on frameworks, right? The solution is frameworks. You have to go to a higher level of thinking and applicability, right? So this doesn't happen again, right? Because their mindset is we're not going to give up. We're going to try to do it more complicated, right? But now, why I say this is nuclear is because as I've known this for more than 50 days, 15 days, right? And I've been doing drive-bys and capturing data. I've got a bunch of plays that match this set. And it's a huge set. Like compared to all the other sets that I have in the pipeline, this is a super big set. And it's a set of elite agents. Like these are elite people, mostly Russian, right? Russian and of course Venezuelan, right? But a lot of Russians in this set. And I have some of them, in camera with the face, right? So super interesting. And it's nuclear for the following reason. First, Agent Enrique Morales had a car belonging to the MW set or the NW set. I can't recall which one. I have to check the system. But he had a car belonging to this new set that just came out. It's just rolling out now. He has it outside of his, or had it 2 days ago or 3 days ago, outside of his house. And on the same day, Atreyu, and I'm going to tell you who Atreyu is, also had another car belonging to this set park outside. They use the car as relays points to, so the digital delivery man come driving, deliver the messages, the car sends them to inside the house, right? So this set ties together Agent Enrique Morales, who is a federal agent, right, with Atreyu, because they both had on the same evening, minutes apart, the two cars belonging to the same set outside of their homes. So this is nuclear, right? So Atreyu is a guy that lives here. I'm going to show you. I call him Atreyu, right? For how do you say that? Affectionate. It's an affectionate nickname I give him. So Atreyu lives very close to my home. He lives here. Let me show you. You can see that the house was deleted from a street view, right? Like to that level of power, right? Like he's able to remove his house from a street view. Like all the other houses are in a street view, right? Like if you click this neighbor, all these houses were built on the same year, 2011, I think it was, right? So, and all these houses are in a street view except his house, right? So that gives you an idea of the level of importance, right? That he carries. Atreyu, I'm talking about Atreyu. Right? So you can see all the houses, but it shows up as if it was sorry, what is it? Yeah, I think it's this one. No, sorry, I'm looking at this wrong. This is Pine Hills. Yeah, this one. This is the house, right? So the reason I call him Atreyu is because, well, 2 years ago he had an SUV that was following me insistently all over the place, right? And it has a vanity plate that says Atreyu, like I think it's the character from the Never-Ending Story, that movie from the 80s, right? And around that time, the SUV was white. But when I drove there in the last few days, the SUV is a different SUV. Now it's black, newer model, but the license plate still says Atreyu, right? Now, he's an interesting character because he is tied to a building, like to a home building company from California, right? That has ties with the PayPal mafia. And like as you can see, building houses is a big component, building neighborhoods really, to deploy Docker hoods. It's a big component of what this network is doing. And that company had property, leased to the company, registered on his address that he was using to follow me, right? So that adds corporate liability to that entity, right? Because they were leasing equipment that he was using to conduct illegal surveillance on me. And he's an employee of the company, right? And again, he had and I have the photos, a plate, a car with a plate belonging to the same set as I'm describing, right? The MW set or NW, I can't recall. That when you rotate the M or the N, it converts to NW. I didn't say this before, but in this set, there is a special set of vehicles that have 3 Ws. Those are like the most important ones, right? And they're usually like older model cars or like cheap vehicles, but the plate is what gives them away because it has 3 M's or 3 W's or M, like it could be WMW or it could be WWW or it could be WMM, right? There's different combinations. So this is what makes it more complex to catch because you have to understand that it's a framework, not a bigram match, right? So anyhow, so that's Atreyu, right? Atreyu had one of those cars, and within minutes. So I drove in front of Atreyu, and I saw the car, and then I drove in front of Agent Enrique Morales, the ICE agent who lives here, right? And he's documented in the book and everything. And he had another car with the exact same set parked outside of his house within minutes of each other, right? Now, this is another interesting data point I'm going to give you is this school, the network uses this parking lot to park surveillance vehicles more or less around here. And, I never understood really why. I thought it was a dispatch center, but with all this new knowledge that I've gathered over the last, 3 or 4 months, I now understand that the real purpose of those vehicles is to watch this entrance of this street where Enrique Morales lives, because it has perfect line of sight, and they probably see high liability on Enrique Morales, right? Because I've mentioned him multiple times, like the 10 counter should be high for Enrique Morales, and he's a federal agent, right? And he was working directly with Michael Pretty, who I also have mentioned multiple times, right? So they must see high legal risk on Enrique Morales, and they can move him because that would be a giveaway. So the solution is to have that corner under surveillance 24/7, right? As they're doing with the cars that they park in this school. This is a school, but they call it the F3 asylum, right? And they even have pictures. Because I imagine, right? Oh, this is amazing. I'm going to save this picture. So they have their own flags in the picture. It's amazing. I'm saying it's amazing because, knowing that this is a school that is heavy under the control of the network, and because that's the area where I was running, so that's how I know. But I was running for years, right, with Penelope Suarez. So that school is a major area of, surveillance. They're not going to let a workout club function in that parking lot if they're not agents, right? Like I imagine they would kick them out of the parking lot because this is a sensitive area, right? Watching a federal agent's house and, so close to all these important agents, right? So I imagine they would kick them out, right? They wouldn't allow this activity in there if they weren't okay with them, right? Is what I'm saying. So I saved the picture. Yes. So the other thing I want to mention is ServerMonkey, right? So ServerMonkey is that company that they steered me to buy servers on 2020, right? It's heavily marked in the index. And they sold me, importantly, a piece of equipment that was a NAS hard drive that, ironically, right, I used it to compute the scores of all the properties in the GeoIndex in the world. Years later, of course, right? But they sold me that, and the equipment is bugged. So, it's probably a good data point, right? And it's basically a company that supplies server parts, which, servers, they're not going to let that go uncontrolled, right? For obvious reasons, particularly in this area. And they steer me specifically to that store, which is, it's probably another blunder, right? Because like if they hadn't done that, I would not have the C7000. I wouldn't have developed any of this technology, right? So this is really a thing of their own making. But any way you look at it. But going back to the sets theory, it's an important breakthrough because, well, it shows, their mindset of not giving up, but making it more complex, right? And also it shows how they're actively adapting and changing their decades-long technology to counter the pipeline. But it's failing, right? And the reason it's failing is because they think that they're fighting with me, and they're not fighting with me. They're fighting with machines, right? And they can't fool the machines with these little tricks. So anyhow, I'm going to close this session for now. I hope you had fun, and I'll see you on the next one.